This is part two of my conversation with Detroit pastor and activist David Alexander Bullock. In the second part of our conversation, I sat down with Reverend Bullock outside his church. We discussed the elected officials who were removed by emergency management and others who were to blame for the continuing Flint Water Crisis. We also spoke about how to fight for accountability and how to end the crisis. I understand at least 12 of those officials uh, got arrested and are going to trial. Is something happening in this case in relationship to the poisoning of so many children and even the deaths?
Well, look, something is happening. So I think we do need to say that something is happening. But these are lower level officials. For instance, a guy like Dan Wyatt resigned. There were pastors from Flint, along with myself, who went to meet with Dan Wyatt and asked him to resign. But this is what people have to understand. If I've been in government long enough, I got a pension.
Mhm.
So sometimes a resignation isn't necessarily a loss,
Mhm.
depending on how long I've been in government. But you have different people resigning. You have lower state employees in the process that go to court, face trial, but no emergency manager, because see, part of being an emergency manager means you have a certain level of immunity. And then, of course, Governor Rick Snyder has been above reproach in this whole process, in spite of going to Congress and testifying. I mean, that's great, but it doesn't seem like he's going to face the music anytime soon with respect to, his role. And I think this says a lot about government, because part of the catch 22 is you want to give maybe high government officials a certain kind of immunity so that people actually want to serve in government. But at the same time, if you make that immunity and those privileges too high, then they can't be held accountable for anything. And so I think this is the kind of situation we're in Michigan.
Okay, once they discovered that this was a real problem, that people were being injured, some people even died probably as a result of this. So they started giving out water to the citizens. I think there's like 100,000 citizens, or a little more, in Flint. Uh, and then the governor just decided to stop it. What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, basically, the reasoning behind that is this formula, parts per billion, right? They test the water and they say some weird stuff like it has lead in it, but not enough for it to be poisonous, right? And I think people need to understand that. Saying the water's safe to drink doesn't mean it doesn't have lead in it. Saying the water's safe to drink means that the amount of lead in it per somebody's test is not high enough for it to be considered dangerous. Now, of course, you're talking about people who've already been drinking water with lead in it for years, right? So I don't even know. I mean, if we have the kind of scientific data that says if I've been drinking water with lead in it that was poisonous for 2 or 3 years, and then I start drinking water with lower levels of lead in it. I mean, does that mean the lead doesn't affect me anymore? I mean, this is a huge problem, and not only have they cut off the water, but people are in crisis because people don't want to drink the water, even though they stopped the bottle deliveries, and people are paying for the water. Right. So there's a whole nother level of this conversation in terms of why have the people in Flint been paying for poison water for years? Why are they paying some of the highest water rates in the country? Right. And why are they being denied fresh bottled water? Right. When if anybody in this country ought to be able to drink bottled water, it ought to be the citizens of Flint.
And I understand that, and I don't know if this is a deal with the state of Michigan, but I understand Nestle is taking water out of the lake uh, in the hundreds of thousands of gallons a minute or something, uh, for pennies, and giving one bottle a week to the citizens of Flint. What's the story behind that?
I mean, with the story behind that is corporate welfare. I mean, and this isn't new, right? Nestle's been taking, draining the Great Lakes for their own profit motive for a while. This didn't just start with Flint, but the irony is, you have a corporation that has access to fresh water, but you got citizens who don't, right? Um, Michigan has a water crisis, though. If you look at Benton Harbor, Flint, Highland Park, Detroit, If you look at those places where emergency managers have been, one thing you'll find in common is a water crisis. You'll find high water rates.
Mm.
You will find impoverished communities paying for very, very low water service. And so it seems to me like the Flint water crisis really should be the canary in the mine for the state of Michigan with respect to water rates, water shutoff, water affordability, water access. Why does Nestle have access to fresh water, but babies in Flint don't?
Yeah, that's interesting. Was Reverend Pinkney in, and where is he now? What's going on with that case?
So Reverend Pinckney's out now,
Okay.
and he's been speaking. But again, he's in Benton Harbor fighting against the emergency manager who wants Gene Clark Park, right? He's in Benton Harbor fighting against the emergency manager that wants to redevelop Lakefront, right? He's dealing. So I mean, very similar issues in terms of how local communities are being disenfranchised by their assets and their access to basic things like fresh water. So if you start connecting these dots, this emergency management again is probably one of the most devious plans to disenfranchise urban communities that we've seen in this country in a very long time.
Obviously, you have a huge church here. You've been engaged and involved since for a number of years now. Uh, what's the next steps?
So I think there are a couple next steps. One, there is an election in Michigan for governor right now, and part of what we'd like to see happen is we'd like to see people come alive and elect somebody who will lead the state in a new direction. Now, people don't want to get partisan, but let's be clear: emergency management and the Flint water crisis have come from the Republican Party. Some people are saying that Michigan may get another Republican governor. Right? We're trying to figure out though, how is that possible when you look at what the history of the Republicans has meant for the state of Michigan? And so people got to get out and vote. They've got to be animated. Secondly, though, you know, I think the city of Flint is at a crossroads. I mean, you got about 12,000 or more pipes that haven't been replaced, right? You got a powerful African American woman there, and Karen Weaver, who's very articulate. But where's the funding going to come from? Where's the money going to come from? How long is it going to take? Right. And then let's add to that, what happens to the children who start to show signs of lead poisoning 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years from now? Right. You got a federal government that's rolling back all the gains, right? Healthcare is being rolled back, civil rights of laws being rolled back. I mean, so the toolkit that we used to have in terms of environmental justice and civil rights legislation, and the push that was being made under the Obama administration to have a more inclusive healthcare program. I mean, we're in this very strange crossroads where all that stuff's being rolled back, but all that stuff's going to be needed in a place like Flint. And so I think we need a progressive move. We need an insurgent move in our politics. I mean, I love the wheels of justice. Sometimes they turn slow. There've been a number of lawsuits around the racial dynamics of emergency management, but I think what I see is the people have to come alive. We can't forget Flint, but we've got to turn our pain into a public policy insurgent push that says it's time for the people united to elect the right people, to put the right policy on the books, and to hold elected officials accountable to get this right.